Okay, so I'm going to show you how to automate a graphic like this using XML game files from StatCrew. So I'm not going to show you too much about how I actually did the design, although I'll touch on that a little bit. Mainly going to talk about the XML integration. So to start with, let's just kind of show you what we're looking for in the end. So this is a file, and all I'm going to do is import an XML game file, and you can see it just updates everything automatically. Score, names, photos, stats, all these graphs, everything's updated automatically. Just like that, real quick, real simple. So as we dig into this, you'll see that there's a lot of legwork up front, but truth be told, it probably is not going to save you a ton of time total, but it will save you a ton of time on game day. So you'll spend a lot of time setting this up at the beginning of the season. Then on game day, it'll take a couple seconds to get you an updated graphic and put out in social media or wherever you're going to use it. So let's dig in a little bit. I'm going to start with just kind of touching on some of the design stuff. To start with, this is my primary design background. I use this design in almost all of our social media and digital stuff that we do. If you're a Buffalo Sabres fan, it will probably look familiar because I stole a large chunk of inspiration from what they do. So that's that, and then this is our file, and you can see if I go to layers that I'm using layers for this. And I'm guessing many of you don't use layers in InDesign. To be honest, I don't use them very much, although this is a case where I've found using layers to be helpful. So for starters, I'll turn off the top layer, which is all the information. So now I just have these two layers. The second layer is the background image, or the background design image, and the bottom layer is this photo. And the reason I did it in two layers is because because this image is not updated automatically through the XML, though it could be. I chose not to do that for this case. But I want to be able to real quickly just drag an image on here and replace it without having to do any modifying in Photoshop or changing the size of it or anything like that. So what I did, and if you can see here, there's actually two image links, and they are the same image, just a left and a right side. So if I pull this over, and you can see if I expand this, it's actually just the full image. But I only want I want this empty gap in the middle. And what that allows me to do is to drag another file right over top into that gap, and it just replaces it. So that's a real easy way to just update that photo. The other thing that the other reason why I'm using layers here is what I can do in InDesign is I can lock these layers, and then when I'm actually working on laying things out, I can just select a whole bunch of things at once. If these layers weren't locked, selecting these things right here would also select the background layer, and I don't want to mess with that. So I put those in a background layer. They're locked. So layers in this instance helps in two ways. So to make all this work, we need a bunch of graphs, and there's no easy way in InDesign to create these graphs programmatically. So basically what I'm doing is creating a graph for a bunch of possibilities, and I'm using 10 steps. So they're basically 10. Well, there's a 0 too. So there's 11 graphs for each thing. So you can see there's 11 for here, 11 here, 11 basically 0, and then 1 through 10. So there's 11 steps for each one of these things, except for turnovers. Turnovers, I just picked a number and I said 7. I think 7's going to be, we probably won't reach 7 turnovers in a game. You can use more, you can use less, whatever you want to do. And so I need to create one of these files. So to start with, I'll just kind of touch on this one because I think it's kind of neat. So basically what I'm doing to accomplish this percentage graph is using a gradient overlay. And so I click on my gradient overlay. I have this donut shape. I have a gradient overlay on it. I'm going to set the style to angle, and I'm going to click on my gradient. And because it's 10 steps, it's not 100 in a percentage. I have this gradient pretty wide. It's basically, I have it 10% apart. So this is an example of, this is my 50% gradient, or 50% graph. And I've got my gradient starting at 45 and ending at 55. If I want to go to 60, I'm going to change that to 65, and this one to 55, and click OK. And so then there's my 60% graph. And so I just go through and create each one of these and save them out to a file. So I have all these files once I'm done. You know, it takes a while. Like I said, it's a lot of setup up front, but will save you time in the end. I'm using a gradient overlay here as well for the turnover graph. So that's basically the graphics. So let's talk a little bit about how this whole XML integration thing works. So for starters, there is you have your XML file, and the way InDesign works, it supports XML, and we can get this done, but it's not real advanced. So we need to do something to our XML file so that InDesign can work with the file better. And to do that, we're using something called XSLT. And basically what that is doing is it's taking your XML file and moving things around a little bit, reorganizing things, maybe leaving some things out that we don't need, just so that InDesign can handle that data better. And so I have this XLT file that I've created, and you'll be able to access it with all the other files. And basically, if you just want to get up and running, take everything I have, there's only one thing you have to change to make this all work for you, and that's this line right here. And basically, this line right here is telling the XSLT, which is changing the XML, where the images are going to be located on your particular computer. The paths have to be absolute. They don't work as relative, so you have to say exactly where those images are. And so you can look for here, all my images, that path right there matches this path right here. So if you were just to download all these files, the only thing you'd have to do is change this path to wherever you downloaded them to, and then that should work. And there's also, I've organized these into some folders. So there's images / graphs / player / team, and those are all accounted for in the file as well. So let's get started. So we have our document, and the best way to get started with all this is basically to design what you want. Make it look, before we even touch anything with XML or StatCrew or any of that stuff, design how you want it to look. And in that process, while you're designing, what you're going to want to do is use styles. And if you haven't used styles in InDesign before, you should. You should learn how to use styles. They will save you a ton of time in not just this, but in everything you do with InDesign. Styles can be a lifesaver. And if you're not too familiar with what styles are, basically the gist of it is you assign a style to a certain text object or character objects or an object or a paragraph or whatever. And what you're doing is you're defining how that looks. So this right here, this is a certain font size, a certain font color, etc., etc. And I've assigned that to a style. So if I want something else to look just like this, I just highlight it and select the font or the style that I want, and so now they look all the same. One of the other benefits is if I decide that, for example, here's one, the individual stats name. If I decide that I want to change how this looks, I can just change it, update the style, and every other one will update to look exactly the same. I don't have to go through each one and say, okay, what was my font size? What was my font height, etc., etc. So use styles, learn them. They're extremely beneficial. So once we've got this all set and designed the way we want, we're going to import our XML. And to do that, to start off, we're going to go File, Import XML, and we're going to select one of our XML game files. And we want to apply an XSLT style sheet. It's already selected for me because I've done this a bunch. But you just go browse and you select that XSLT file that's included with all the other documents and click OK. And what you'll see over here is now we have this navigator that has all the information from the XML file. And basically I have it divided into three sections: game info, V, and H. H is home, V is visitor, game info is just general information about the game. So what we want to do now is expand these and drag some of this information into these boxes that we created. So for example, here is the date. So I want to use this F date, which is the date that's formatted, and drag it in there. And you can see when I drag it in there, it loses all its formatting. This is one of the reasons why we use styles, because now I can just come in and select date, and now it's got the correct date, and now it's the correct style. And so I just do the same thing for location, and again it's going to lose its style. And so I just come back in and select location, and that's all I use from game info. You can see there's some other things here, like temp and attendance and wind and weather, and you can use whatever you want. So in each one of these V and H is all the information about each of the team. So one thing to kind of think about once you've done all this is, if you're going to do this for a home and away game, it's probably easiest to set up two InDesign documents, one for home games and one for away games. It will in the long run, it will make things easier on you. So we're going to go with home, and then we're going to use info and the name, change home team name, and then that should be team name, and the record, drag that in and change that to record. And you can see in my style sheet I've got for all these things that are for the teams, there's a score and a score O, a record and a record O. Basically record is the home team and record O is the opposition. And if I was setting up one of these for an away game, record would be the away game and record O would be the opposition. Basically, if I use this document, if I imported an away game, what would happen is everything would switch. So all of our team information would be in gray as opposed to cardinal, and I want our stuff to always be in cardinal. So that's why you would do two different graphics for home and away. And so you just go and do this for all the things that you want included. So in this data, we have a handful of stuff. So we got info, that's just general info on the team. We've got graphs. So these are some of the graphs that we're going to use. For example, total yards. I'm just going to click and drag that onto that image, and it's going to replace it. And turnovers, and just drag it onto the image. Third down conversions. And red zone efficiency. And you can see that those just update automatically. Other than graphs, we have scores. So final score, just drag in. You can see again, we're going to lose our styles every time we do that. So we just want to go back and update that. Now actually info back here, I want an image. Drag that image in there. And so we've got general info, we've got the graphs, we've got the scores, the final, we have each one of the line scores, you know, the image graph for each one of those line scores, and so on and so forth. And then we have totals, and totals, these are all just the total stats. So total plays, total yards, third down conversions, red zone efficiency, etc., etc. And so we can drag some of these in here. So let's go turnovers. We'll drag that into turnovers. And so now you can see that this number now matches what the graph says, 3 to 3. And the same thing for, let's go third down conversion. We'll drag that in there. And so now you can see 56% matches the graph. And this is an example of why I used a gradient, because where's 56%? It's, you know, if we just used a hard line, it would, you know, the graph for 56% and 55% would probably be the same when you're using a 10-step graph. So we've got totals. We've got all this information. I'm not using a lot of it. I'm using some of it. But we also have this thing called these leaders. So rushing leader, passing leader, receiving leader, defensive leader. Basically, rushing leader is the top 5 players ordered by rushing yards, and passing leaders, I think, is just the top 2 ordered by rushing yard or by passing yards, receiving yards, etc., etc. And so what I'm gonna do is let's do passing. We'll go with the first player. And so this is where I'm using to update this information right here. So I'm just going to drag my name in there, and that's actually the full name. And I don't want the full name. I actually want the short name, because in my design, the short name is better. And so I'll just change his stats name, and then change his image. You see that image updates, and then I want to go into passing to get all my passing stats, and so I can just drag each one of these: attempts, completions, completion percentage, and touchdowns. And then again, I need to hold my shift key down and select each one of those and reassign their styles. So there you go. And so you just go through and do that for each one of these things. Everything that you want to update it, you just drag into the box, and it will be good to go. So then once you have all this done, and we'll go over this one where I've actually got it all done, then you're going to import a new XML file. One thing to remember when you import an XML file is it always goes into the node you have selected. So for example, if I had this selected and did my import, everything would go underneath here. And I don't want that. I want it at the top. So always make sure your top node is selected when you're importing XML. So I'll have that top node selected. I'll import XML. And let's go pull in UPS. And so the first time we did this, all we did was check apply XSLT. We want to keep that, but we also want to check this only import elements that match existing structure. And basically what that's going to do is that's going to prevent anything that's not already in this tree from coming in. And that'll just keep everything clean, and it helps to prevent some mistakes. But you click OK, and it updates. Just like that. So like I said, it's a lot of work up front, but in the end, it takes about 30 seconds to update, and you save it out as a PNG or a JPEG, and within 2 minutes, you have a graphic that has all these updated graphs and charts, etc., etc. Things that a lot of the bigger D1 schools are paying big money to have companies or staff do. This is something that a smaller school can do affordably, and all it costs is some time in the off season. So that's pretty much it. I think let me show you a little bit more of this XSLT file for those who are interested. This is kind of the heart of this whole process, is this XSLT file. And if you're doing football, you're probably fine just taking what I have and just using it. but there's a bunch of information in here, and basically it's just reassigning things and moving things around. And if you have some basic knowledge of XML, you will probably be able to figure out what it's doing and probably be able to make some changes if you wanted to. For example, you can see, here's our rushing leaders. If you wanted more than 5 people listed, you could come in and just change this 5 to another number, 6, 7, 10, whatever it is. Passing, same thing with passing. You could change that. And the key, though, is to get this, to make things work the best, is you want to get this XML file set, and you want all the data that you want set before you import it into InDesign. Because once you've imported it into InDesign and you start making changes and moving things around and assigning XML nodes to elements on the InDesign document, it just gets harder to use a different XML file at that point, different XSLT file at that point. So there's a lot of stuff in here. Defensive leaders is organized by total tackles. I'm not actually using that on my graphic, but that's there. Defensive starters, those are all listed there. Offensive starters are all listed there. So there's a lot of information here. The formatted date, I mentioned that earlier. Depending on how you use dates in StatCrew, and to be honest with you, I can't remember. One of the StatCrew programs, actually, you can only do it one way. But our conference, for us anyways, has mandated the month, day, year format. And so by default, that value will be in date. And what all this text right here is doing is it's just converting that string into something that's more usable on a document. So all this basically converts it so it says October 3, 2015. So that's the XSLT, and like I said, you may be able to figure this out if you have some basic XML knowledge. It's not terribly complex, but it can be confusing. Basically just looking at what I've done, you should be able to extrapolate the same type of stuff for maybe another sport. So that's my quick wrap up of how to use XML game files from StatCrew in InDesign to make quick graphics. I hope I helped you out, and I hope you learned something. And all the files, and including everything that it would take for you to just make this work, you'll be able to download. So, thanks a lot for watching.